Hello. This is Galacron. Back to Ares. Um, so where we left off with Ares and how he whispered into Aphrodite's ear until she agreed to leave her luxurious hall for the comforts of her marital bed again. So, of course, these comforts didn't last long when the delicate chain fell from the ceiling. Hephaestus called to his father Zeus to bring all the gods and goddesses to the chamber he shared with Aphrodite, and look upon her shame of that of Ares, now bound hopelessly together. This is a common story. Hephaestus wanted to expose Aphrodite stepping out of the marriage with Hephaestus, and her with Ares, the god of war. So this was his way of doing it, was the invention of the trap, of the chains falling, and they were trapped together, and he called over Zeus and the other gods and said, look, here is the evidence, they're in bed together. All the gods came to the marital chamber and laughed heartily at the situation, but the goddess abstained for the sake of propriety. There was much debate about the fine Ares would have to pay as an adulterer, and even more about how much more the gods would be willing to pay to be in his stead. Eventually, the shackles were taken off, and Aphrodite disappeared to Cyprus, and Ares, after cursing Electryon to become a cockerel and always alert the people to the rising sun, fled to the land of his birth, Thrace. So, the worship of Ares. A god's home outside of Mount Olympus is the place where he or she has either worshipped above most others, or, in the case of Poseidon and Ethiopia, where the ancient Greeks believed this to be the case, Ares' homes were Macedonia, Thebes, Thrace, and, unsurprisingly perhaps, Sparta. These sites were invariably colored by the presence of such strong associations with Ares in such a way as to make them out to be as savage and barbaric as the Greeks could be. That he was worshipped at Thebes cannot come as a surprise, considering his role in their foundation myth. The 5 remaining Spartoi that did not murder each other were considered the founding members of the Theban aristocracy. Although Athena's part in the proceedings is worthy of note too, since it was on her advice that Cadmus sowed the dragon's teeth in the earth. Therefore, Ares' savage beast was cultivated by civilizing Athena, which led to the production of soldiers worthy of aristocracy out of the savage mouth of a dragon. Civilized warfare out of animalistic savagery. There was a temple to Ares in the Agora of Athens, but this was a much later addition to the religious landscape, most likely dedicated by Augustus during the Roman period, and cannot be considered as pious to the cult of Ares as in other places. One such strange example was the wild place of his birth, Thrace. Thrace was the name of the lands north of Thessaly, and it was not only considered the birthplace of Ares, but also his home. For this reason, Ares escaped to Thrace after the humiliating incident in Aphrodite's and Hephaestus' wedding chamber. Obviously, who wouldn't be humiliated by that? The ancient Greeks saw Thrace as an untamed land filled with great but ferocious warriors who were the allies of Troy during the war Homer wrote about, in the Iliad. Due to the permeable nature of the Thracian border, as the ancient Greeks perceived it, there was little distinction made between the Thracians, Macedonians, and the mystical Scythians in very early documents. The ancient historiographer Herodotus stated that the Scythians of this place worshipped Ares above any other god, and it was to Ares alone that they made images and dedicated shrines. Herodotus went on to describe the specific way in which the Scythians and Thracians worshipped Ares. Every district in each of the governments has a structure sacred to Ares, namely, a pile of bundles of sticks 3/8 of a mile wide and long, but of a lesser height, on the top of which there is a flattened four-sided surface. 3 of its sides are sheer, but the 4th can be ascended. On this sacred pile, an ancient scimitar of iron is set for each people, their image of Ares. They bring yearly sacrifice of sheep and goats and horses to the scimitar, offering to these symbols even more than they do to the other gods. Of enemies that they take alive, they sacrifice 1 man in every 100. Not as they sacrifice sheep and goats, but differently. They pour wine on the men's heads and cut their throats over a bowl. Then they carry the blood upon the pile of sticks and pour it on the scimitar. Wow, what lovely imagery. They were so kind. They carry the blood up above and down below by the sacred pile. They cut off all the slain men's right arms and hands and throw these into the air, and depart when they have sacrificed the rest of the victims. The arm lies where it has fallen, and the body apart from it. Again, sounds wonderful, lovely story. After this, Herodotus described how their methods of war matched their ferocious religion. Decapitation, scalping, and drinking the blood of the first man they slaughtered in battle are among the vile tactics employed by these Ares-loving peoples. That's out there, man. But they were not indicative of how a civilized Greek might have worshipped Ares. For that, it is necessary to turn to Sparta. Given Sparta's reputation in war, it is unsurprising that Ares might have been worshipped there. I don't know about might. He was. However, since the Spartans were definitely Greek and considered as such by ancient sources, they could not be so easily dismissed as savages, which they weren't, like the Scythians or Thracians, despite the fact that most Greeks tended to eschew worship of Ares more than any other. Well, that's true, but Sparta heavily worshipped Ares. I mean, they're Spartans, warrior race, in terms of the city-state. So yeah, they did. What emerges out of Sparta, therefore, is a much more interesting type of Ares cult. From the lists written in Linear B to the classical scholars who looked to Homer and Hesiod especially, Hesiod's Theogony, as their utmost authorities on such matters, Ares and the other elemental war god Enyalios were often considered one and the same god. Enyalios was even known to become an epithet to Ares, as Ares was for the other gods. The Spartan mercenaries that traveled with Xenophon sang paeans to Enyalios before joining battle, as if it was in their home city that the cult of Ares and Enyalios had the most dedicated followers. There was a long-standing tradition that the Spartans performed human sacrifices to Ares, though by the time of Apollodorus, who described the story, this was already based on mythological accounts. What is known about Spartan sacrifices seems to be fairly normal practice. Prior to battle, they solemnly sacrificed a cow to Artemis Agraterra, but after a victory, they sacrificed either an ox or a cockerel to Ares and a dog to Ares and Ialios. This sacrifice of a dog to Ares was repeated regularly outside of war by the youths of Sparta, who sacrificed a puppy to him. Wow. The myths of Ares influenced the civic practices as well. The story of Ares being imprisoned for 13 months by the giants finds its place in the month of license, every lunar year. That's actually true. This meant that every 13 months, or lunar year, the city would embrace a whole month of unbridled celebration akin to that which Ares might have felt on being released by Hermes, his brother, his half-brother, from the pot in which he had been imprisoned. Well, yeah, that's actually true. There were a couple of giants, and they caught Ares and threw him in this little vase or pot, and he was in there for, I don't know, a couple of months, and he was shriveled up, and he's alive, but shriveled up because he didn't have ambrosia and nectar to keep him youthful and strong. So it was Hermes that got him out. Good old Hermes. He rescues so many people, so many gods even. This month of license coincided with another interesting tradition in Sparta concerning the status of Ares. When describing the locations of temples in Sparta, the geographer Pausanias noted that curious tradition opposite this temple is an old image of Ares in fetters. The idea the Lacedaemonians express by this image is the same as the Athenians express by their wingless victory. The former think that Ares will never run away from them, being bound in the fetters, while the Athenians think that victory, having no wings, will always remain where she is. Rather than hold Ares in disdain, as might be expected from what appears in the Iliad, the Spartans wanted to keep the god from leaving their city and taking his qualities with him. In fact, the only time the god was unfettered was when he was released from his imprisonment, pot, vase, whatever, during a nerve-wracking ceremony at the beginning of their month of license. The worshippers would have watched with bated breath as the chains were removed from the image. And once no vengeance was wrought upon them for daring to fetter the god, it would have been understood that they and their month of celebration were good in the eyes of Ares, and the celebrations after that fact must have been even the more exhilarating. As a result, it seems that Ares was not the hated god suggested by non-Spartan sources, and the qualities and gifts bestowed by Ares were seen as so benevolent to the ancient Spartans that they risked their own destruction by putting his image in fetters. What, then, could have been the difference in the points of view between the Spartans and other Greeks concerning the gifts Ares could bestow upon them? The Homeric hymn to Ares could go some way towards suggesting an ancient undercurrent of belief in Ares. Ares, exceeding in strength, chariot rider, golden-helmed, doughty in heart, shield-bearer, savior of cities, harnessed in bronze, strong of arm, unwearying, mighty with the spear, O defense of Olympus, father of warlike victory, ally of Themis, stern governor of the rebellious, leader of the righteous men, sceptered king of manliness. I didn't know that one. Where's Heracles? Who whirl your fiery sphere among the planets in their sevenfold courses, through the ether wherein your blazing steeds ever bear you above the third firmament of heaven. Hear me, helper of men, giver of dauntless youth. Shed down a kindly ray from above upon my life, and strength of war, that I may be able to drive away bitter cowardice from my head and crush down the deceitful impulses of my soul. Restrain also the keen fury of my heart, which provokes me to tread the ways of blood-curdling strife. Rather, O Blessed One, give you me boldness to abide within the harmless laws of peace, avoiding strife and hatred, and the violent friends of death. So I think that's kind of the prayer they were going for Ares. At least one of them. Here Ares is the master of both bravery and fury, and as such is capable of dealing out punishment or restraint. Both in equal measure, Homer gave form to the personifications of abstract ideals. But, despite the high esteem in which Homer was kept, later Greeks such as Plato and Aristotle said that it would be impious to believe that the real gods could be as petty and human as Homer's anthropomorphic creations. Now, isn't that the joke of the year? I mean, yes, despite what Homer said, or Hesiod, or anyone said, the gods were as petty as mortals, or even more so. I mean, once all the major wars were done, the gods kind of battled each other out of ego, greed, jealousy, name it. When the major wars were finished and there was just mortals and gods, the gods went at each other. Maybe because they had nothing else to do at that point. They are, after all, immortal. They'll never die. The gods were manipulated, without malice it is assumed, by the poets in order to bring dramatic effect as well as understanding to the ineffable. Ares and Athena were both given the realm of war as their domain, but their actions defined what roles they played in these realms. Their associations with other deities defined their actions further. Ares' love affair with Aphrodite, for instance, could be a connection between the raw and often ferocious emotions of both anger and love. The company the gods kept adorned their characters. Zeus's consorts were Themis and Metis, and his daughter is Dike, which represents justice, whom wicked men succeed with violence in dragging this young maiden through the streets, but the gods honor her. And when she sits down beside her father and tells him of the wicked mind of men, he causes they made a mistake here. He causes the whole people to suffer. Athena carries Nike, the goddess of victory, with her wherever she goes, while Ares is accompanied by Phobos and Deimos, fear and terror. That's his two children, two sons. Nonetheless, this didn't mean that the ancient Greeks were limited by the narrative constraints of the poets. These stories could influence the cults and beliefs of the worshippers, but the nature of the gods, as suggested by the appearance of their names in the Linear B texts, was already considered ancient to people in Greece by the time ancient Greek culture really started to take hold. Ares was the god of war and of fury and savagery, but he was also the god who could bestow ferocious bravery on anybody who asked it of him, even a poet such as Homer. There's some other online resources, and unfortunately, we have come to an end of Ares at this point. Yeah, there's online resources. Well, of course, it's online, but yeah, there we have it with Ares. I mean, it's kind of interesting. They, put in the other aspects. Ares is the god of war. He got the physical side more so because Athena got the military strategy side because Athena is the goddess of wisdom. So, Ares is the god of war, the god of bloodlust, and, courage and ferociousness, the battle side, the physical combat side and bloodlust, the fury of combat, physical combat, the sword, the axe, the shield, even bow and arrow, even fist fighting and wrestling and all that. It's like the encompassing physical side of war, all that bloodlust and fury and ferociousness, the physical act of battle. That's the side of war that Ares got as the god of war. It's like, well, you have two gods. You have Athena and Ares, and war is the realm of both of them. But, what they're trying to say is like, well, their actions also will define both gods. That's kind of like mortals. Actions define you, They hold the gods to the same metric, With Ares, they will hold Ares to that metric, the bloodlust, and the physical battle. And then Athena, the goddess of war, in terms of the military strategy side, because she's the goddess of wisdom. So again, holding that metric to Athena would be like, well, in the gods' war on the giants, Zeus actually did talk to Athena, because it's like, well, she's the goddess of wisdom and strategy and war. So during that war against the giants, it was common for Zeus to talk to Athena and said, okay, we need to adjust the plan for this war, the stratagem. And Athena's like, okay, we already got Heracles, and this is what we're going to do. And Zeus says, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Athena will say, okay, do it like this, and it's going to work out better, and we will win. So, again, the metric is held for all gods, but in this case, for war. So the bloodlust and physical combat to Ares, and the goddess of wisdom, Athena, will be the war strategy, military strategy war for Athena. So, there's our short series of Ares. So, thank you for... Sorry. This is Galakrond signing off. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed Ares. Thank you, Galakrond signing off.